Well, hello and welcome to the channel. My name's Johnny and you're watching Hillbilly Modeling. And this is going to be part one of our new build, which is going to be a tank. And it's going to be this one. This is TACOM's M60A3 with the M9 Bulldozer. So we got our blade attachment and everything. So we're just starting out on this build. So let's go ahead and jump down on the bench and see how much we can get done. So the first thing we need to do is go ahead and get into our instructions here. We'll flip over to, let's see, step 1. That's a good place to start. And right off the bat, we have some holes that we need to drill in the front armor here of the hull. And this is 0.8 millimeter holes that we need to go ahead and drill. Now there are other little indications here for other holes, but we just need these particular 6. So I'm going to take a permanent marker here and just kind of match them up with the ones that we actually need to drill. And so we'll mark those, and then we'll double check and make sure that we didn't mark the wrong one. That way we'll just get the holes that we need to drill out. So we'll go ahead and select ourselves a drill bit. Now that's the 0.8 millimeter. And we'll use our Tamiya handy drill here, which will make quick work of these holes. Now, of course, we want to make sure that we drill perpendicular to the surface that we're drilling in. So we need to check that angle and make sure that we are square to it. And then we'll go ahead and drill these holes out. And as you can see, the handy drill and these nice sharp bits make pretty quick work of this for us. And of course, since we drilled from the inside out, we do have a little bit of cleanup here where the bit pushes through to kind of trim that off a little bit so we don't have any of that in our way. I'm sure it would probably melt down fine with Tamiya extra thin cement whenever we go to attach our part, but we just do need to be careful to make sure that everything's going to go well. Now we also have, through the injection process, this little nub here. There's 2 of them on the bottom of the hull, which we need to clean off. And we'll just clean that off with an X-Acto chisel, which works pretty good for that. Just needs to be nice and smooth. So we do have some parts that we need to start off with here in the buildup of our lower hull. And we need to go ahead and probably cut those off and get them cleaned up. Now, of course, I don't want this whole video to be about cutting off a tremendous amount of parts and cleaning them up, but we'll just talk about this very first part. As you can see, I do leave the sprue gates long on the parts when I cut them off, and that way I can take the sprue cutters and get in real close to the part without any sprue being in the way, and we can get that cut off real close to the part, and then we just sand and buff out any little nubs that are left from that sprue gate, and that gets all the parts ready for assembly. And of course we will do this with all of our parts, all the ones that we can, and get them cleaned up. And since we're dealing with a lot of really small parts, being organized is always a good idea. So turning our attention back to our instructions, we have these A7 parts and of course the A18s, which go to the hull. And then we have these real small brackets, G29, G33, G31. Those 3 little G parts, the G parts, are for the shock absorbers. So those are the hull attachment points for the shock absorbers, and every single one of them are different. So we're going to leave those still on the sprues. We're not going to mess with those yet because we're going to do those one at a time, and we'll just get the other parts, the A18s and the A7s. So we'll start off with these A7s on the rear of the hull. Now, it's real important that we don't put these on upside down. Just make sure that the parts are oriented the same as they are in the instructions, and that way we won't be putting them at an odd angle or anything. Just want to make sure whenever we put 2 parts that are identical on the same surface, that they are either parallel or perpendicular to each other, depending upon how their orientation is supposed to be, so that they don't look like they're crooked. Here they're parallel to one another, and we just need to make sure that they're straight. So next up we have these tie-down points that need to go. There's 2 for either side, but as you can see, it really doesn't set down into the locator slot like it's supposed to, because there shouldn't be a gap there. So the locator tab that's on the mating surface there, we'll just go ahead and sand that down until we get a really good fit. Don't want to take all of it off, but we do need to make sure that we don't have a gap there when we go to cement these into place. So with that done, we'll go ahead and cement these tie-down points right onto the hull. And we want to make sure that they are kind of perpendicular to the surface, more or less. They are supposed to angle down. They don't stick straight out. So just make sure that they're fully seated and the angle should be just right. Now when it comes to these shock mounts, we are going to take them off of the sprue one at a time, and then we're going to attach them to the hull right after we take them off the sprue. That way we're not getting anything mixed up. So we're starting off with the G29 part, and we'll go ahead and clean these up as best we can. They are fairly small pieces. Cut those little sprue gates off, and then a little buffing there with the sanding stick, and then we can go ahead and test fit. Check to make sure that everything fits like it's supposed to. It looks pretty good there. And we'll just drop a little bit of To Me Extra Thin into the slots where it's located. And once we do that, we just drop the part right into place and make sure that it's fully seated and not crooked, because we don't want these crooked, because each one of these have a little bit different angle. And because of that, we want to make sure that our shocks are going to line up correctly. So we just need to make sure that everything is set into place. And of course, I like to use more cement than necessary, but you know, don't want it to fall off, right? Next two, we're going to do exactly the same way. And as you can see here, we have them installed. And because of the shape of the hull and their particular angles, each one of these parts are totally different than the previous one. And that will be true on the opposite side as well. So we also have some travel stops to install, and these is A37, that's the part number. Now these travel stops are there to keep basically all the road wheel arms minus the first one and the last one on each side from over travel. They are just glued or cemented to the hull there, and they're locating slots, and we do want to make sure that they are perpendicular to the ground surface, and they're not leaning one way or the other. And so there are 4 per side that needs to go onto the hull. Next up is step 2. Now these are bump stops, and what they have is they have volute springs that the road wheel arms come in contact with before they bottom out. And they have their own brackets, of course. Now we got 2 singles and 2 doubles. The 2 doubles are the front, the 2 singles are the rear, and of course these brackets are very specific to their location, so we want to make sure that we don't mix that up. So when we go to assemble these, it's simple. On the single ones, there is a single post on the bracket, and then there is a hole in the bottom of the, well, I guess it would be in the top of our volute spring. Since we're assembling it upside down, it's in the bottom. Anyway, we just slip it over the post, press it into place, and then put a little bit of To Me Extra Thin in there. And that'll secure it for us. And we have 2 of these to do. And for the bump stops on the front of the vehicle, it is a double. So we have 2 volute springs that we need to assemble in the same fashion that we did the 2 single rear ones. Simply just slide them onto the post, and then we'll put a little bit of Tamiya extra thin on them to secure them into place. Now, the only thing you need to remember while assembling these is do not get them mixed up, because they have a very specific location and the brackets are very specific to how they fit. So we can't mix up the left and right sides, okay? So on to step 3, we have our final drives. And we also have the mounting of the bump stops that we just assembled. And also in this diagram, it shows all that attachment hardware, like the shock mounts and the tie-down points. Needs to be attached on this side. So we'll go ahead and do all these small pieces first, and doing the shock mounts the same way we did on the opposite side, one at a time for those. And then we'll worry about the final drives. So here we have all of that attached hardware. And next up, these are those bump stops. And the reason why we're kind of singling these out is because, well, first of all, it doesn't help if you're trying to put it on backwards. Make sure we got our orientation correct. There we go. And it doesn't necessarily want to seat completely. Even if you put a lot of pressure on it, it doesn't want to go all the way in. So I think what we need to do is make some small adjustments here. And that'll be these long sides that slide into those long slots. I'm just going to bevel those contact surfaces so that it'll fully seat into those really narrow locator slots. And once we get that all beveled down for us there, we can go ahead and stick that into place. And that seems to work pretty good. Now, any additional space that might be needed to be taken up there, I'm sure the Tamiya extra thin, at least that's what I'm betting on. The Tamiya extra thin will soften the plastic enough that it's going to seat just fine. And as you can see, there we are, and it's pressed into place. And then all we got to do is locate the rear one, which fits fine, no modifications needed. And we'll just touch that with a little bit of Tamiya extra thin to cement it into place. Now, it never hurts to go back and to double check and make sure that everything is fully seated. That way, just in case something tries to back out on us a little bit, because these are rather deep slots in the hull, and we just want to make sure everything is set the way it's supposed to be. And as you can see here, that's all the hardware that we have attached so far. Next up, I really want to check and make sure that our final drive housings are going to set flush to the hull, and they do. So for assembly, it's only 2 pieces. We have the back and the front piece of our final drive. Simply put those together, and a little bit of Tamiya extra thin there. Let that soak right up into that seam, and that will secure these pieces together. And then with a little bit of cement here for the attachment, I do put a little bit just in the middle there, because these are really flush fitting, and it has no gaps whatsoever. So that's a really, really nice fit, and they locate exactly like they're supposed to. And we just have to put the one on the opposite side, and it glues up the exact same way. So far, most of the fit on this has been excellent. Excellent. Little bit of fiddling with the front bump stops there, but everything else is going together really well. So now we need to concentrate on these hull plates that goes onto the back of the hull. Now we have 2 pipe fittings there that goes onto the special hull plate just on that one side. We want to make sure that that orientation is correct on those. So as you can see here, I've already located these little elbows. Now these are hydraulic line fittings that pass through this rear plate. And it's very important that they are located exactly correct. Okay? Because we have some hard lines that are going to actually connect up to this, and if we don't put them on correctly, that's going to be a problem. And here you can see I've attached them to the plate, and I'm just going to file off, or sand off rather, a little bit of that sprue gate that was left. And when I go to locate it on the hull, I find out that it doesn't really want to sit. And apparently there's some flash on the bottom of this that's keeping it from setting on that indicator on the hull where it's supposed to actually be, because I just didn't look at the bottom of the plate. So it's very important that we inspect all of our parts before committing to cement and test fit like we've done here, to make sure that we correct those little problems that are going to cause us a little bit of an issue. So once I get it located, we can go ahead and cement that into place. And we need to pay particular attention to the fact of how these are oriented, because we do not need to get these upside down. If we get that plate upside down, they're going to be pointed in the wrong direction, and they're not going to connect to our hydraulic lines. And there we go. That's exactly how they're supposed to be, one pointing off to the side, the other down. Now, if you were pointing off to the inside and up, it would be backwards. So now we're ready for step 4. Now, these are our tail lights and our towing pintle. So we have 2 parts for each of our tail light assemblies, and then 3 parts for our towing pintle. And we're going to start with our tail lights, but as you can see here, that tail light is exceptionally small. And if I can get it flipped over here and get zoomed in, it is, well, it's more than a half moon shape. It's got a flat at the top of the light, or the orientation where the light would be correctly oriented, not upside down. How's that? And that's got to correspond to a flat that's on the pin inside that bracket. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our box lid here to help us assemble this. And in the event, I should say, that we actually drop something like that tail light, we're not going to lose it. Hopefully it'll just bounce around inside the box and we'll just have to pick it back up. So this part is so small, you really don't want to use tweezers on it, because if you do, you're going to have an issue. So I simply orient it on my finger, and then I set the bracket on top of the actual tail light, and then we flip it over upright, because you just can't stab that pin into that little bitty hole from dropping the light into it. Trust me, I know, I tried. It just wouldn't work. So we're going to press it down with some tweezers and just put a little bit of to me extra thin there. And if we did everything correct and just make sure we're fully seated, the light will be oriented correctly. And there we go. We're in good shape. That's a really easy part to lose. You got to be careful. Next up is our towing pintle. So the best thing to do is to orient your parts during assembly just like they appear in the diagram. That'll keep us from getting things either upside down or mislocated. The bracket and the center section here for our towing pintle, the swivel part, it has a locator tab, so that's not a particular issue. And then in order to keep from getting our actual pintle upside down, we just orient it. That's easy for me to say, just like it shows in the diagram. Now I'm going to make sure that mine is perpendicular to the ground surface, but in reality it doesn't matter if it's twisted off to the left or right, just as long as it's not crooked. I don't know, does that make sense? Yeah, you know what I mean. All right, so we're going to go on to step 5. Now, these parts that we just finished assembling, I think now's a good time to go ahead and put those on first, and then we'll start working on the rest of the road arms and stuff. So, taillight brackets, they simply set into these two little slots, and I just want to make sure that they are fully engaged in the slot. And then same thing with our pintle bracket. Simply put that into place, and a little bit of extra to me, extra thin, probably wouldn't hurt on this surface. And you do want to make sure though that it is straight, because we can get that just a little bit crooked and that will look odd. So make sure everything is nice and straight, and attach a little throw a little bit of to me extra thin there for attaching that last light bracket. Now those left and right light brackets are specific parts, so we want to make sure that we have those identified so that we don't get the left on the right and the right on the left, because the bracket is just very slightly different on either side. Next up, we have these little hinges. Well, they're half the hinge, and that's for the rear grille doors that goes on the back of our M60 here. They're easy enough to put in, just as well as easy enough to lose, so be very careful with these parts. I chose to cement them into place first, and after it's dry, I'll come back and do what little bit of cleanup needs to be done on these hinges. But location is very, very critical, otherwise the mating hinge half that's already on the actual grille doors are not going to line up. So it's a good idea to go ahead and cut those doors out, or should I say off of the sprue gate. And before these little hinge pieces dry, and do a test fit to make sure that they do line up. And once you're satisfied with that, we'll go ahead and do the hinges on the opposite side. Also, in step 5, we have our road wheel arms along with the shock absorbers. And as you can see, each one is different. There are lefts and rights, and some have shocks and some don't. And then we have 2 that also have the slack adjusters for our track. And then the center ones make 3 each for left and 3 each for right. So as you can see, they're all very different, pretty much. So I do label up all these cups to keep all the parts together for whichever specific road wheel arm we're working on. We're going to start off with I, or India. And we have our bearing cover plate here, or retainer, that goes into the hull. Now, it is a keyed piece, so you can't get it backwards. And we also have a keyed locator for our shock absorber. And just get that to tack up a little bit there and get that shock absorber to stick to the road arm. And just takes a few seconds. And once it does, we can go ahead and locate this particular road wheel arm into its exact location. That way we don't have to worry about trying to figure it out later. And we can also check the fit before that cemented joint for our shock absorber has set up. We want to make sure that that mates to that shock mount the way it's supposed to, and that everything sits nice and firm, and it does. So it's really, really amazing how well that fits. So that's part I, and it's already on the hull. Now we haven't cemented it in yet. We're going to do that later. So the most complicated road arm is the one with the slack adjuster. So we'll go ahead and put that together next. So when it comes to assembly P, which is the front slack adjuster and road wheel arm, if I can say that, assembly on the same side where we put item I. We need to go ahead and put these together. So we need to orient these parts just like they are in the diagram. That way that keeps us from snapping stuff together or cementing something together that is backwards or upside down or whatever, because it's very easy to get these backwards. Like the slack adjuster that I'm putting in right now, it simply snaps into place. You don't have to glue it or cement it into place. But if you get it backwards, it will not mate correctly onto the road wheel arm, which we actually need it to do that. So a little bit of to me extra thin there, and then there's a locating hole and pin, and they simply just go together. And we'll go ahead and put a little bit more to me extra thin on the bracket side. And that's pretty simple. Now you can get some of this wrong if you are not paying attention, so watch out for part orientation. And for these front road wheel arms, that bearing retainer is different than it is for all the other road wheel arms. So you need to make sure that it is, you got the right one, the correct part, first of all, and then it just simply slips into place. It's tab located, so it's not a problem. Put a little bit of to me extra thin on it there, and you do want to make sure that that is pushed fully in and seated. And then we can go ahead and attach our shock to our road wheel arm here, and the same way as we did for the rear road wheel arm. Just let that tack up just enough to hold it into place. And then we can go ahead and assemble this to our hull. Just simply lining everything up so we have basically 2 pins and a shock to line up when we go to put this one in. And simply press them in until they stop. And then we're in good shape. Now we want to check and make sure that all these surfaces are engaged and that that road wheel arm is fully inserted into the hull. So this builds up into a really, really good actual representation of an M60A3. I know because I used to work on them. And this is what they look like. As far as the rest of the road wheel arms, it's just a matter of making sure that you've got the left side on the left side and the right side on the right side, and it's not an issue. So we'll just go ahead and slide all of these into place, and they just press right in, and it is a good snug fit, so we don't have to worry about sloppy road wheel arms here. Now once we have all of our road wheel arms, I'm having trouble saying that today. But once we get them all in there, we just want to check and make sure that all of the road wheel axle shafts are lined up with one another. And if we need to make any adjustments, now's the time to do it while all the contact areas are still not solidified, if that makes sense. The glue's not dry. How's that? So it's pretty much a mirror image on the opposite side of the vehicle, and once we get them all into place, we can do a final check here and make sure that all of our road wheel arms are lined up correctly. And this is our last chance to make any adjustments that are necessary before we cement everything into place. And once we're satisfied with all that, just time to put on a little bit of to me extra thin. And just let that wick right down into those joints there for our road wheel arms. Because these are not obviously a working suspension. We need everything nice and solid because we do have those rubber band style type tracks that goes onto this kit. And we can't afford to have this suspension moving around. Now we also don't want to forget about gluing up the swivel point, that offset for our actual slack adjuster, if the name of it would come to mind. And before everything is nice and solidly glued into place, we'll check one more time. So on to step 6. In step 6, we have all of our road wheels that we need to put together, which consists of 3 pieces each. So we got to make 14 of those. Support rollers, I should say. Those are 6 each, 3 per side, and then we have our 2 drive sprockets, 1 for either side to make up. Now, staying organized is really going to help you with your assembly process. So once everything's cleaned up, keep your parts separated and you shouldn't have any real issues. And first up is the outer road wheel. So that is a 2-piece affair with the rubber tire being cemented to the rim section and or wheel section. Going to cement that up a little bit there, and then when it comes to the inner road wheel, just put a generous amount of extra thin around in that lip there, and we'll just press them together. And the parts fit extremely well, so it's not an issue, and there are no alignment tabs or anything like that that you have to worry about. So simply put it together to your liking. Orientation doesn't really matter as long as you assemble it correctly. Support rollers is simply the outer wheel. Will slide onto that center post. And you can't get this wrong. So not even if you tried, you couldn't get it wrong. So it simply goes together that easy. And you have 6 of those to make. And then we can move on and work on our drive sprockets. Now here you have to pay a little bit of attention to the fact that there is an alignment slot and an alignment tab between our hub and our actual drive sprocket, as you can see there. So just simply slide the sprocket onto the hub and give it a little twist until the alignment tab lines up. Check to make sure everything's fully seated, and then a little bit of cement will just wick right down in there for us, and that will secure the part. And we have the exact same operation for the opposite side, or the inside in this case. Simply line up the tab and a little bit of to me extra thin. Now, I'm not doubting the prowess of the TACOM engineers, but I do like to check and make sure that my drive sprockets are lined up, the tooth to tooth, so that our tracks are going to fit. So next up is the assembly to make sure that everything goes together. Now, normally what we would have is all of these would be glued into place. But we're not going to glue them into place because it's easier to paint them if they're not cemented into place. So here we are. They all fit, and they are just a little bit loose. As you can see, they spin very freely, and there are no poly caps or anything like that to keep them on. So when we do our final assembly, we will have to cement these on. Well, that'll wrap up this part of the build. So we managed to get parts 1 through 6 done. We haven't installed our road wheels and drive sprockets yet. We're going to leave them for a little bit later. It's much easier to paint those things if they're not installed on the vehicle itself. And we managed to get all of this done. So by my count, and that's of course hillbilly math, so it's no telling if I'm right or not. But I did try to keep track of it here. Looks like we got like 143 pieces cut off, cleaned up, and assembled on the hull, and then of course all of our road wheels and drive sprockets and support rollers and stuff. So special thanks to all my subscribers. It's because of you guys I keep making these videos, and I hope you enjoyed this one. And if you're new to the channel and you're not a subscriber, I hope maybe today I earned your subscription. If you have any comments, or if you've built this kit, I'd like to hear from you. Just go ahead and leave it in the comment section. And until next time, guys, stay safe.